Alright, getting started with oxyacetylene. Thoroughly read all the directions that come with the gas welding setup before you do anything. If you purchase if you're using a welding setup from someone, make sure that the instructions are included. If you have the experience with help, get some help. Get set up. The compressed gas within danger so that welding process there are more safety considerations to understand that we covered in this book. Obviously, since you deal with a hot flame in the process of applying sparks, you should be clean work and clean area away from the flame material. The good fire extinguisher should be handy as well for the source of the water. If sparks get into your shoe, don't waste your extinguisher on your use water spray bottle, which is already on hand at times of cooling off pieces of metal. Following the specific direction, attaching the gauge regulator, so set your filled up bottles of oxygen and acetylene. The bottles should be secured with a sturdy. 319. Most home shops use those oxyacetylene single stage regulators and torch sets, unless they do not do a lot of welding and cutting. They're just fine, though you have the readjust the outer pressure for the more frequently than the professional two-stage regulators. 320. Gas flow is regulated with oxygen cylinder 1 to 5 psi with the welding, depending on the thickness of the material. The welded acetylene pressure is adjusted to the same high pressure setting. The performing cutting by the acetylene must never exceed 15 psi to the torch. Alright, the bottles should be securely stored to the chain either the bench welding card with the previous provision of keeping them typically from easily before the regulators are attached below and dust the cylinder valve by cracking them. You should stand by the side of the cylinder when you're doing this. The outlet pointed away to get quickly gas opens the various valves slightly and closing it again. Use just a little blast with the gas will ensure the connection with free dust. Use the proper fitting of the wrench and not adjustable only with the last regulator and the gas hose connections. Only usually the blast fitting. Remember the acetylene connection for the left-hand thread of only the regulator slowly opening with the cylinder valve with the pressure adjusting the screw. Use the T-shape is then turned out out of the way. On gauges shall use cylinder pressure and the out of the hose torch pressure for the after the hose and blow them out of the blast of the gases. Adjust the regulator to provide with the 2-3 psi working pressure at each of the bottles. The cylinder valve should always be open slowly to the bolt away from the end. For the oxygen valve should always be open with the way with the type of the seal. The best either with the fully sealed closed or fully open. The acetylene valve that should be open about 1/2 turns. Connecting the hoses to your torch with the gas cylinder valves closed. In most of the cases, it involves the wrench, but there are some professional steps that have the snap-on connections like air line hoses to make quick wrenches work out of the chain of the torch. To set the medium tip of your set. Your instruction and measurement of the gas pressure work with the tip of the thickness of the metal you are suited for attached to the torch, and everything is assembled. You can set the connection with the soapy water for leaks. You will need to connect. You will need something to be light the torch with the wireframe metal with the striker. You shall shall be included with your set seal illustration. Never use the open flame. Some of the such as cigarette lighter match starts your torch or match to start your torch. Your fingers need to be well out of the way, and you should be wearing leather gloves and the heavy clothing with the leather shoes and boots. Do not tuck your pants into the boat boots. You can create a pocket there. That could cause sparks. Likewise, do not wear pants with cuffs. For the same reason, have your colored welding goggles on your head, but not yet over your eyes. All right, 321. Same with some of the torches equipped with the quick release fittings than you usually see on the air compressor hose, making them quick and easy to change. 322. To start the torch, open acetylene valve with 1/2 turn the light immediately with a striker like this, and never use the match cigarette lighter that you could easily burn your hand. Once you add sooty acetylene is lit, gradually add the oxygen until you achieve a neutral flame. Alright, flame adjustment. This is very important. The step of the gas welding when you are marking with every time that you pick up the torch, the bat, brave, the cut or solder, you have the practice to the point with the wears become the second nature. Only one. Open the cylinder valve to the slope of the described before. Make sure that the regulator pressure is correctly. Then hold the torch from the operating hand. Right in your right hand, and the striker in the opposite hand. Both the valve of the torch are closed, but open the acetylene valve of the torch and the half turn operating with the strike near the torch tip. Then the flame, some suitable flying particles, oxygen quickly add some oxygen soup, but this should disappear from the step of the illustration flame type. You will have the right of the carbonizing flame, which is overly rich for the acetylene. As you add more oxygen, the flame characteristics will change, which rich makes you while the rich mixture gives you a wide, flared out yellow flame, the adding oxygen will give you a flame narrow and brighter. Alright, the ideal flame of the most gas welded is neutral flame, which is neither the carbonizing or oxygen nor oxidizing too much oxygen. When adjusting the torch properly, the large flame with graduating from the below end away from the down, but near the torch from the inner cone should be lit with the blue, adding too much oxygen with the inner cone with a smaller pale color, thereby hissing the sound. You'll need to practice achieve with the neutral flame. When you start the welding, you will see what happens to the metal when the flame is incorrect. The proper method of shutting off the torch is equally important. Close the acetylene valve on the torch first, then the oxygen. If you do it the other way around, there could be a small amount of gas left in the tip. Then you could ignite. And if you're through the welding of some time, if a good safety practice to close down the gas cylinder valve as well. But if you're going to weld again in a short while, just shut off the torch valves only. So you're going to want to shut off the acetylene first. Alright, your neutral flame, you have an outer flame and a white core flame, neutral flame, carbonizing, acetylene, outer flame, white core, outer flame, gas welding. You will need a lot of small pieces of the clean scrap metal to practice on very thickness. Even if they only intend need the lightest sheet of metal welding started in the practice with the thickness of the 1/4 inch. Become familiar with the different side of the flame, adjusting cleaner scrap of the peat and scrap of the. The oxidizing flame has too much oxygen. Featherly blue flame with small with the wide inner lane. With the carbon flame is acetylene features a larger flame with a larger blue inner core with a longer colored one around that. And for the welding, adjusting for a neutral flame. 324. You do not have to worry about grounding the gas equipment, but this dangerous flame involved with some of your welding projects and practice sensitive. The best done over some fire bricks like these, which you can get at the welding supply store. What was to say? It says the cleaner scraps, the better welds that you will be. Welders will weld. The better your welds will be. They apply for the type of the welding gas electric. You shall sand the grind of the area of the weld to remove any of the coatings of rough. You should not use the testing of metal for the galvanized coat of the zinc. Any of the called kind of plating. Not only the welding can be dirty, the difficult the coatings may cover the harmful gases vaporize in the weld. Starting your first exercise, start with a piece of the steel level the flame surface is not on a wooden bench. The ideal work with the steel tail stable is not just the wooden bench that within the sheet metal nailed onto it. With his fire bricks on the top of the fire bricks can be obtained with the welding supply center. With addition, being non-flammable, they do not suck the heat out of the welding sample like of the sheet table there with no chain with the going into the weld. And same sample to brick, and it can be very embracing of the practical practice with the steel table with the various scraps of the welding stuck on your table. While your torch is adjusted, to properly pull down your goggle to put the torch and tip of the iron 1 inch from the seal. Just try to make a long weld. Puddle of molten metal. The torch should be leaning at about a 45-degree angle with the flame pointing direction. Bead is going with well. The steel starts the melting in a small pool where you started. Move the tip along and give it the rhythmic motion of the oval shape as you go. Typically, follow the straight line blending of the newly heated edge of the puddle with the back edge of the puddle. The process will having a heavier leave line or ribbon ridges the burning hole for the metal. There may be too much oxygen. The torch must also cut the metal with the tip of the too large. They are possibly advance of the torching too slow. If you go too fast, the torch too far on the tip slow, then your puddle will be very small and won't penetrate the metal very far. The more the torch is up pointed straight down at the metal at no angle, the deeper the penetration will be. The vice versa. The practice of different angles until you can make a bead like in an illustration with the even ripples and proper penetration. Of course, not all of your welding will be done in this way. In fact, almost all your welding will involve adding filler rod, but now you need to learn how to torch and control rhythm. Many of the projects that you encounter will involve welding along the irregular line cut, especially repairing work. The welding up with the crack to become familiar with the making of the bead along with the irregular line. Without filler rod with the draw, the zigzag or curved line. On steel soapstone, practice with making the good bead with the proper hand with control of everything in the gas. Welding, your hand must be comfortably steady at all times. Welding classes, the students often exchange the first name of the script of the welding bead as on a piece of metal, which changes you and handling changes in your bead direction. 325. Heat of the gas is in control with the matching of the gas flow of the side of the thickness of the material, welding trouble speed, the tape of the work, the distance, the control, the level, the size, penetration, with all the things to the right, but you should be able to heat your first your first puddle molten with about 6 seconds to move along with your bead. The left is left the bead run with the cold, but the bead stands up with the sound run to the hot and too fast. Is the right better bead is good width of the penetration. When you are successful through experiments laying down a good bead with the metal that you're trying to join with a two-piece with the filler rod, this requires not only the good torch but control of the other hand with the filler rod. Generally, the filler rod should be a small material, same material within the base of the metal with a good fusion welder. If you weld aluminum, the filler rod must be aluminum, and the steel rods are used in steel. Steel filler rods are coated with the copper with using the rusting cleaner with the welds. As basic rules, like the filler rod with the same distance. Same diameter and thickness of the metal with the welding. Most of the light materials are welded with 3/32 inch, 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch rod. You will probably never gas weld with anything bigger than 1/4 inch weld, 1/4 inch rod. To the thickness, to weld thick plates, several materials required make a good fusion. Various forms of electrical welding, usually much faster than torch multiple pass systems. Welding with a filler rod. Let's say you need to join two pieces of 1/8 of an inch thick metal with the straight bead with the right to left, with passing the two pieces such for the body together where they are to be joined. But you have something in the block of the clamping them and placing them. It won't move as you weld. Starting the welding pool at the right end of the seam. That as you move the puddle develops, use your left hand, insert the tip of the filler rod into the center of the hot puddle, then pull it away right away instead of with the rhythm, and alternatively putting in the rod and taking out the bead progressively to the left. When we describe the puddle, the edge of the puddle close to the direction will you travel in the front of the edge, while the part of the puddle that you just defined is in the rear. You have either done with the soldering lead, may have the bad habit of heating the soldering with your torch and soldering the iron, letting the molten lead dip into the joint. The bad habit is one should bring it with you. One you shouldn't bring with you welding the practice. Molten metal should be the metal filler with melt with the filler rod, not the torch with the rod. Six that you may not keep the molten metal with enough that you're already filling the rod to the fast, either with which would result with a low quality weld. Or the skill making with a good bead, even in the overlapping the oval of the good penetration for the taking considerable practice. But if you learn the two-hand of the gas welding techniques any other welding system you pick up later will be considerably easier to learn. With the welding, you will do weld by forehand welding, in which the angle of the torch of the flame is somewhat forward with the direction of the desired bead. Preview the metal as you go with it makes the additional filler rod with the front end of the pool. The puddler is easier, but it becomes truly heat. Sometimes this is it seems like keeping the proper torch position, moving at the right speed, circling over the top, overlaying the tip and the dripping of the rod with the right at the time, and adjust the much for the concentrate at one time before you will hang that out. This isn't brain surgery. Millions that have learned above before you with a good long practice with the long beginning with examine things that you are filled with the welding construction you're appreciated with the practice the two lay down those moves beautifully that look with where they are done some instead with the human beings. Indeed, some of the kinds of welding are done with largely robotic welding machines, but good welder can be virtually perfectly joints that are stronger than parent metal. We were mentioned before the dealing this for the critical point of making the good weld with the two edges of the joint, but the need to be same grounded and clean with the bring metal with the should fit with the closely possible. The small grips are inevitable. Small kinds of work can be bridged with the filler rod, but the guides should be kept at the minimum of the thicker metals. Will be fine with the easier to make the cleaner weld with the good penetration edge of the two plates with the levels before you weld. This can be done with the follow grinder. Thin metal materials have the idiosyncrasies mostly go with keeping the two edge alignment as progress of your weld to be more and more heat traveled over the parent, so that after the welding, some difference in the metal that you may encounter is hotter than the metal that started. You may have adjusting the torch with slightly and compensate the puddle form faster. Alright, 326. When you practice the butt welds, tack the near corner of the first, then tack the top corner of the slight gap between the parts, and then this will close as the plates grow with the welding heat. Another problem with the materials is the parent metal tends to distort the application for the heat, meeting expand with the heat. When heated, the two edges of the parallel you start with the welding probably won't stay that way. Usually, the edges pull away with you may have the gap bridge, but it wasn't there when you started. The solution of the lack of the tack weld at the intervals applying the much heat of the tack weld is simply a bead of one of only two particles done quickly. To join the seam of the sheet metal with the tack, the end of the first in the middle with the then put the tacks every few inches of the part, alternating the ends of the tack. When you go back along the ladder to do the final full seam welding, the tack models can be bolted into the main seam as you go. For this piece of it, you'll stay aligned with the whole way. This is particularly important when you join long sheets of metal to seam with the welding of the new quarter panel on the cover of the auto body work. You need to keep the warpage to the minimum. In some cases, when doing the final seam with the tacking sheet with the metal, you may stop after the few inches that are weld and quickly apply a body dolly to the backside of the welded arm area with a hammer on the welded area on the top of the body hammer. The hammer welding, alternatively welding a hammer technique straight into the seam and two panels, which while they are still hot and pliable, and the resultant seam when done by a good body paint requires much less grinding filling to make it ready for the primer and paint. All right, 327. Start your bead out about an inch beyond with the first tack. Proceed toward the end. Keep the torch steady with the drop in the bolt and beads over the filler rod, typically in the puddle quickly and evenly so as you go beyond building an overlapping series of puddles. Before you are done, you will notice movement of the warping same paddles. If you plan the automotive body with work with a torch, you have to practice a lot of thin metal to get the hang of the welding without burning holes and warping the work. Gas metal is not suitable and not suited for thin, high-strength body steels used on today's unibody cars. All right, 329. As you weld, inevitably the sparks and spatter blow back onto the torch. If it plugs up, your bead will be spotty and your torch will be may go out entirely. Keep the tips clean with the set of the fine wire cleaners that come with your gas set. The basic joint illustrated with the butt joint with where the two pieces of the metal are pushed together with welded along with the seam of the where they are melted. There are many kinds of joints that helpful type of the reading. With the fewer type of these are practiced enough. The butt welds are thicker than materials and corner welds with the two edges that make the angle, but they can either be inside or outside corners. The outside corners are easier and perform because they can see clearly, and the piece need not to be beveled. But just place them in the edge of the groove or the V or the groove of the bevel will do, or inside of the corner depending on the angle involved with the action. Harder to observe being shrouded with somewhat of the piece of the as you feel practice the more difficult welds and try a lamp weld. This is where the two pieces lay over each other, overlapping. You run a bead where the joint is, and depending on the strength required for the application, you may want to weld the seam on the other side as well. In auto body work, sometimes panels have to be overlapped instead of butt weld. In some cases, the back side of the weld seam is seldomly welded. A T-weld is where you joint piece to another piece with the right angle to form the letter T in the profile of this required with some of the additional practice to perform well. As the part of the weld and pool and puddle is being made uphill with the larger piece of the make and the more heated with the smaller part, you have to place the torch back of them further in both pieces to get the feel of both heat and each requires. Further practice sessions for you may involve the trying the weld piece with the tube and the angular iron or the typical material for the home shape project. The type of the joint, flat plate and plate of the tube, and then marking the corner between the two pieces with the angle iron. Careful measuring cutting will be required to make gapless corners for the good weld. The square rectangular tubing is often used for the projects such as shop, equipment, utilities, trailer, and should be practiced with a 98-degree corner. The two pieces with the cut in 45-degree angle. This inside weld and weld together with that one you'll find the practically assemble the real world project that you can always turn the work around and make the seam are flat in front of the front you and the bench on your bench. Often you are forced to weld in a vertical seam even when the weld upside down underneath the seam something. Later difficulty and dangerous require the best in full face protection helmet instead of goggles and a leather apron over the arms and shoulders to protect falling sparks. Welding an exhaust system under the car, especially if you do not have access to the lift, can be extra challenging. Why these do not seem like challenge anymore? You're doing when these don't seem like challenges anymore. You're doing very well. Then you can try making nice fitting joints between the piece of the round tubing to fit the two pieces of the round tubing together, such as the roll cage of the race car. Requires a measuring tape and measure twice, cut once. Procedure lots of patience, cutting of the grinding of the round into join with the full contact. Another procedure to try with the rounding of the tube, making the slip fit in the one piece of the tubing side with the just fit over the other. In this case, such cases you can weld the round and joint in the high strength application with the cash cut outside the tube of the fish mouth as being joined in a 90-degree angle without another piece of the rounding tube. when the piece is welded onto the inner tube of the fish mouth, makes a much longer welded seam between the two and give them strength. Other types of welds you may run across with the project for the spot weld and rosette welds. The former is found often in auto sheet metal work where you join the two pieces of the light gauge of the material together without welding the seamly entirely with the spot weld adjusted around the welding spot rather than be is made with one piece on the top of another where you just as the metal puddle with the two panels together to move the distance away from the making another spot weld. Filter rods is often not used in such a case, especially with the appearance of the most important than strength. So most spot welds lie in enough for the little prep required to make them ready for the paint. Modern cars are equipped with thousands of the spot welds, but they are accomplished by special electrical welders, usually computer controlled and robotic. Where little or more strength of the spot welds required with the rosette and plug welds can be made, but there is many of the panel on the top of the holes and drilled with the punch in the two intervals where you weld the up in the holes, buttoning the upper and the lower panel together, but you will join them securely into that spot. Plug welds often do require some filler rod. Sometimes with the gas welding work with a little torch go out and you will get a loud pop of the torch when that will really get into your attention because you do not expect it. When welding tight quarters, you may find may tend to get with the tip of the clove of the work will overheat with the tip of the cup with a tiny explosion. Gas pops inside the pipe inside the tip, which is called backfire. The alarm will greatly this will alarm greatly when it happens. The answer was simply not to get close when you may have been working close to get the piece hot enough. But in this case, you need a large tip and more flow of the oxygen facilitating with the tank regulators to maintain the right heat level of the torch further than away from the confinement of the welded corner. Welding too close with the worker will also will allow dirty your tips. So if you have a backfire, stop work and shut off the gas at the torch. Remove the tip through the clean. Your welding set will have to come with a setup with wire tip cleaners. Cool the tip with a water-soaked rag. All right. 330 shows the previous serious accidents with flashback indicated loud squealing noise. The flashback caught with the gases burned inside the hose. For safety reasons, but hoses should be equipped with a flash arrestor and which are reverse flow check valves. Some of the readjustment gauges pressure have been necessary for the using check valves. These are flash arrestors. All right, something aching in the torch backfire must much more dangerous than flashback. There was a combustion of the actual flow of the gas trail back into the torch evenly hove. The at least their danger damage of the regulator hove the combination breach of the tank. There is a possibility of serious explosion. Flashback, the torch goes. There is a loud squealing of the hiss noise. There's black smoke coming out of the torch. It happened to shut off the oxygen torch for the facilitating of the torch. The cylinder valve to the welding supply center should have an available flashback flame arrestor. The install the two gas lines which are in the hose where the hose attaches to the regulator. Acting like one-way valve, they designed to prevent serious accidents caused by the flashbacks. They should be installed with any of the gas welding setup where the hose is attached to the regulators. When making the welds with the filler rods, you will run across the situation when the rod gets short enough for your left hand to get close to the comfort with the heat of the welding. Before making the bead, practically will have shown that how the fast welding rod gets sheathed up and how longer the rod will be needed to complete the seam. The start of the rod enough to do welding and whole seam. The seam along with the weld to take several of the rods to complete. You will have to stop the welding and getting a new filler with it. It will take some time directly to get the hang of the cutting of the bead with the new rod where you left off before. The trick of between the whole bead look will continue to weld without little pile of the build up where you stopped and restarted. The rod should short many with the welders. Simple attack short pieces onto the end of the new rod and go right on welding. When you get good at it, the bead will not have the chance to cool off too much. Inside the welding, you may want to take a welding rod and put a bend into it, and so that it will put in your hand in a more comfortable position farther away from the heater of the action. Changing your welds. Chances are you won't be able to make nuclear vessels welded in home or shop. The other welds critical in the require X-ray inspection, pass inspection, often done with the commercial welding. However, you do not want to learn how to make strong joints. The practical time should be included with the same systems testing as well. Look as is important. Good looking bead if it may not be properly welded, especially if it does not have the good penetration. Check with the good penetration required. Looking closely at the backside of the welded joint, which is easily to do with the practice of sample plate for the real world situation. Isn't always practical to get back on the side of the where something you've welded like a joint between the two rectangles with the round tubes. You should be familiar with the proper heating control penetration before you consider yourself through a practice for your phase. And looking at the back weld to see that if you build up the backside a small amount of the drop through an acceptable 100% can be. Alright, your flame fluctuations. Moisture in the gas moisture in the gas condensation in the hose, insufficient acetylene supply. Remedy: remove the moisture from the hose, adjust the acetylene pressure, and have the tank refilled. Explosive sound while lighting the torch. Your cause: oxygen acetylene pressure is incorrect. Remove the mixed gases incomplete. The tip of the orifice is too large, or the tip is dirty. Remedy: adjust the pressure, remove the air from the inside of the torch, replace the tip, and clean the orifices of the tip. Flame cutoff. The cause: the oxygen pressure is too high and the flame outlet is clogged. Remedy: adjust the oxygen pressure, clean the tip. Popping noises during operation. The tip is overheated, the tip is clogged, the gas pressure adjustment is incorrect, or the metal is deposited on the tip. Your remedy: cool the flame outlet while lighting the little oxygen flow. Clean the tip and adjust the gas pressure. Alright, oxygen flow is reversed. Oxygen flowing into the path of the acetylene. Your cause is the tip is clogged, the oxygen pressure is too high, the torch is defective, the tip of the valve is loose, or there is contact with the tip and the deposit metal. Remedy: clean the tip, adjust the oxygen pressure, replace and repair the torch, and clean the orifice. Backfire: there's whistling noise and the torch handle grip gets hot, flame is sucked into the torch. Your cause: the tip is clogged or dirty, oxygen pressure is too low, the tip is overheated, the tip orifice is enlarged or deformed, the spark from the base metal enters the torch, causing the ignition of the gas inside the torch. Amount of the acetylene flow through the torch is too low. Your remedy: clean the tip, adjust the oxygen pressure, cool the tip with water, letting the lathe of the oxygen flow, replace the tip, immediately shut off both torch valves, let the torch cool down, then relight the torch, readjust the flow rate. 331. After you've gained bit welding experience, a good torch welder is trained. In one day, we will learn to read the welding condition based on the flame of the torch. The troubleshooting chart indicates some of the cause careers for the torch flame problems. Alright, good penetration, particularly important with the welding auto body panels, because of the outside of the welded bead. Probably going to the ground down with the body grinder and the preparation, filling the paint with the strength of the top side, building up the puddling while going with the joint strength really totally on the fusion of the two pieces below the surface of the test. For the practice welding keeps the help to you with the hacksaw to cut at the center of one of your weld joints to see what the penetration is. You can always tell looking at the end of the joints because of how you may have ended the bead and how you may have ended the bead. Well, assuming the home shop that has good sturdy bench, it can be useful testing the welded joints. Your first practice weld, you may have straight seams within two pieces of the butt welded together. Take the best example to put in your vise with the welded seam clove with the jaw, clamp the pair of the vise grip with the pliers, the edge of the upper piece with the starting, hitting up the piece with a hammer, holding it into with the pliers stuck so it cannot fly off. Hammer up the upper piece, then is bent over the way of the onto the vise, making the 90-degree angle of the welded pieces. Remove the sample of the vise first. Remove the sample from the vise and examine the weld. The upper piece of the broken during the hammering obviously wasn't strong enough for the weld. Any other various joints that practice that can be tested with the hammering when they're joined with the stress secure of the piece of the hammer, the one of the two joints, and however the hammer may be backside area of the joint together toward the side of the weld, then good penetration with the sheave of the backside of the weaker front and bending the metal with the direction really test the backside with the good fusion. Each of the weld is 100%. 100% transportation may be strong enough if there is undercutting with the top side, undercutting the groove of these along either both sides with the blades, caused by applying too much heat over the holding of the torch with the wrong angle. The stress in situation undercut area with the weakening point joint may fracture right along the undercutted area. 332. The picture demonstrated is the bracing with a gas torch, as much as such as repairing casting antique car sheet metal, fluctuating coated rod being used of bracing is not fusion process and used with a higher melting heating damage to work of the surrounding metals. All right, we'll read the cutting. All right, brazing. Brazing welding is not a true fusion process. Some such as we have the discussion. Apparent material does not melt into the puddle. The parent metal is heated in brazing. The rod melts in the joint, securing the two pieces that gather together. Brazing rod is made of brass, or alloy of copper or zinc, and an alloy of copper or zinc that you, the conjunction with the flux, which may come already on the rod, or it can be can that you dip the rod in the coat as long as you go. Braze joints are as strong as welded joints, but when done properly, when overlapping the piece of the brazing, particularly helping with the higher heat of fusion welding, would harm the parent metal with adjacent materials where the pieces being joined together are made of brass copper. The rod materials are much lower temperature for the parent metal, with the basic principle the heat with the parent metal just above the melting temperature of the filler of the rod, so that the parent metal would not torch the metallic rods. Melt the rods overheating the rod with the torch from the boil with the zinc out of the rod with the cover the pour adhesion in the joint bracing, and the most often done where this is overlapping the two pieces of the building up of the broken area with the casting. There will be remachined to the original shape or after brazing. A joint braze must be thoroughly cleaned by grinding the filling with the sanding, and when you have selected the proper rod with the material you working on, copper, zinc, and ferrous metals, you begin the heating of the joint with a torch, and using a lot less the heat when you are welded. You should put the torch tip at the back of the 2 to 3 inches, which are much further back with the gas welding. When you meet the metal, and the metal is dull red, apply the fill rod to the hot spot with the parent metal to see if it melts in. Heat the next to the spot. Apply them more flex roll, keeping the process going until you've completed the seam. When along the seam, completed with the brazing, preheat the whole area. When the metal is corrected with the temperature, brazing rod will flow nicely into the joint. If the metal is too cold, the brazed material will ball up, and the surface is too hot, it will spread out over the wide area. While smoking during the white smoke during the process usually indicates the area with the overheated, just the smoke of the zinc boiling off. Not only does it affect the quality of the joint, but the fumes can also make you sick, and breathing in enough of them. You do not have to overheat the rod for the fumes giving off during the brazing. Always the braze with the adequate ventilation with a good respirator that makes the mask that helps the insurance with the brazing up. You put the rejoiner piece with the galvanized metal with the better of the standard gas welding. However, this combination of the brazing and fume, the plating, and the galvanized should be avoided unless you are outdoors. If you're familiar with the basic soldering, you know the good adhesion and ensure the flux and compound with the prepared with the metal with the strong bolt. You may also be familiar with the term tinning of the tinning and the process of soldering of the applying the thin coat of the lead with the flux surface between before the main solder is melted. The procedure for some of the braze welding, except for the braze, the material then usually take the place for the brazing and one sleep step rather than two. The brazing to the larger joints require the light coat of the brass foul flow with the surface making the ease for the main brazing of the stick to it. Flux brazing can be part of its rod itself, and 3 flux rods are inconvenient with maybe have the metal contain the flux of the welding table. You see the heat. You simply heat with the end of the brazing rod, stick it into the flux, withdrawing it from with the flux over the see the illustration. Alright, 333. Most welders dip the tip of the powered flux for conveniency, since the pre-coated rods can flake them and expose moisture. Plain brazing rods are heated with a torch, then dipped into the can of flux and pulled out out of the coated with enough flux for an inch or two brazing travel. Once you have started the brazing process, the rods will always be hot enough to pick up the flux, and you need more. You need more. The pre-flux rods are convenient with the coating that is somewhat fragile, but would not take a rough handling. These rods are most always kept dry, very dry. When brazing the thin sheet metal with the purchase area overlaps between the two panels with the key with the strength of the joint, where they are 3/4 of an inch over the lap of the brazing, and adhere to the joint actually stronger than the parent metal. The cover of the parent brazing rod of the metals are about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Instead of the steel metals melting at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, the brazing will induce much of the large warpage of the metal with which that has been used for the years. The maybe air of the traditional auto body repair the overlap of the brazing joint, but also make then the joint are stiffer than the too thickness of the metal, so the seam of which they install the body of the patch panel that takes less hammered dolly work to prepare the painting, and brazing will not work on the butt joint, but because there isn't enough captured. Alright, 334. Lap welds are best brazing, such as the joining overlapping sheet metal with the panels where the brass has lots of the contact air with the adhesion as a fusion weld attack at the end of before running with the whole seam. Alright, 335. When you start with a very clean metal with the brazing, although the flex is designated with the surface clean, you are good. You go. Designed to surface clean as you go, leaving the some iron slags afterwards. You have to keep the torch further away from the seam than the welding to keep the overheating of the brass. 336. End of the view of the Braze lab joint showing in the brass the flow between the plate with the capillary action. Much of the solder does apply with the hot copper pipe. The base metal must be heated to the point where it melts in the rod, not the torch. 337. There is some silicone slag after the bracing arrows, which they can soften with the water. After the part cools enough, the water will not warp. Then the rest comes clean with a wire brush. Alright, the area with the capillary action for the flow of the brass, each piece, although you can back up the butt joint, will strip of the similar material will give it the overlap of the both pieces, good bonding area with the brazing. Although brazing is still a technique used by older body craftsmen in restoration antique collectible cars, it should be naive with the new cars. They are built with lower alloy, high strength, and lighted steels. And in fact, some of the manufacturers specifically specify that no torch work at all should be done on the body metal. Only the metal inherent gas welding is acceptable because of the narrow hated area of the faster welding beating travel. Another metal of the steel can be brazed as well. The stainless steel with the casting of the brass bronze, and even aluminum with special aluminum brazing rods used. If you have special consideration question, ask your welding supply advice. Choose the best brazing rod for the job. Or one of the advantages of the brazing is dissimilar immediate metals can be joined, which ordinarily cannot be used. The fusion welding is also where the two pieces of the different thickness of the being joined like a thin pipe with a thin flange way. The brazing preferred to the ordinary gas welding, where you have to be very good with the torch play with the right amount of the heat over the thicker piece of the weld, not burning them up into thin pieces. Brazing and neither piece is heated beyond the melting of the point with the brazing rod. After bracing welding seam, that you will see that the flux remains on as kind of the crust on the parent metal. It should be removed with the wire brush and could be softened with water first, which makes the wire brush more easier. 338. With the versatility of the gas welding equipment has also found with the exhaust system business, you must carefully not cut the weld near fuel tanks, fuel lines, electrical components of the brake lines, but the equipment is highly portable and cut as well as weld. Long welding rod can be bent and curved around the exhaust pipes to be the tight quarters. Oxyacetylene cutting.